Hello, girlfriends! How are we doing? I hope well. I hope you're not feeling like a rat. I know when you click on this video, you're like, wow, Luna, you're really hitting this nail right on the head. I am, because I absolutely love this film. Today, we are talking about the 1990 film, The Witches, and I'm not talking about the revamp that is happening. We're talking about the original with Angelica Houston. This film has everything that my, whimsical, morbid, little child head wanted. It had fantastical women, it had dark magic, and it was written by Roald Dahl. Without further ado, let's get into the video. God, this look is a moment. As I said, this episode we're talking about the 1990 cult classic movie, The Witches, starring Angelica Houston and some other people. Guys, I did my best to look like her in this film. Let me know what you think. Wigs with bangs are never easy to achieve, and I tried to do my cheeks to kind of look like her signature apple cheeks. Anyways, you know the drill, let's get right to it. It is time! How does she talk in this film? Something like, Witches! It is time! Right? It's like German, kind of? It's time for... Alrighty, so this very Twin Peaks-esque film opens up in Norway with a cute little boy and his grandma is telling him some folklore about witches that we learn probably is not too fictional. Grandma Helga tells Luke how to spot a witch. In this story, witches hide in plain sight but look like what we wouldn't expect them to look like. She tells him some characteristics of these witches to look out for if you're ever walking on the street and you see one of these ladies walking by. Real witches have the following: claws, which is why they always are wearing lovely gloves. They're bald, so they're usually wearing a wig that can sometimes scratch because it causes a rash. They have square feet with no toes, so they're always wearing a sensible shoe. None of this heels BS, although some of them wear them anyways. They have blue spit, which they use for ink. Very handy. They have a purple tinge to their pupils, and they have large nostrils, which they use to sniff out children. Now, children to them smell disgusting and putrid and they hate them. Now, a freshly shampooed and cleaned child would smell absolutely the worst to a witch, because when there's a dirty child, the witch smells the dirt, but when the child is clean, they smell the kid. And the kids smell gross to them. When I was little, I thought this was so funny, but nowadays it's like, yeah, kids frickin' stink. Grandma says, quote, "You can never be sure if it's a witch you're looking at, or a nice lady." Grandma then tells Luke about her childhood friend who got taken by a witch and then put in a painting of a cottage, and throughout the years you could see her move, doing different chores. The painting of her grew up through the ages, and then eventually she was gone one day. This made me reevaluate any single old country cottage painting I ever saw. Really cooped me out. Now Luke's family is on vacation. Unfortunately, in a plot twist, his parents get killed in a car accident, and his grandma takes him back to England because she is now his legal guardian, where he almost gets taken by a witch! Grandma then has a fainting spell. We learn that she's diabetic. The medicine for this is a summer by the sea. Medicine is so weird. Now, at this hotel, Luke's four shadowy pet mice cause some drama with the hotel manager, who is Mr. Bean. I don't even know his real name, but he's Mr. Bean in this movie. Mr. Bean also has a thing for the maids on staff. Luke then meets famous Roald Dahl character Augustus Gloop. Just kidding, his name is Bruno, and he's very stomach-centered. We then find out that this hotel is infested with witches. They are disguising themselves as members of the fake news Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. Cruelty. Now, leading this cross-stitching coven is the Grand High Witch. Her name is Eva Ernst. She's a little bit kooky, but she's mostly iconic. While playing with his mice, Luke then gets kind of stuck in their meeting, and he hides and he spies on the witches' meeting. Now, these witches then derobe, they take off their wigs, they take off their shoes, and they are all gross, disgusting witches. The Grand High Witch herself looks like some kind of bird that has never used sunscreen, who has lived a couple too many decades. They then learn of this plan to get rid of all of the children of the world! And the Grand High Witch has concocted a potion that will turn children into mice. Now the plan is that all these witches will open up chocolate shops and kill all the children in the world. They'll quit their jobs with the money that the Grand High Witch has made, printed. They then bring in Bruno Augustus Gloop from the lobby, who has taken the potion a couple hours previous, and the clock is ticking and he's about to turn into a mouse. He does. They all see that it works. They all go freaking cuckoo. Luke is discovered, then tries to flee to tell his grandma because his grandma knows all about the witches. And his grandma has actually suffered an evil magic-induced fainting spell because of her newly found diabetes. This is not good. And the Grand High Witch snatches Luke and turns him into a mouse in front of everyone. So now Luke and Bruno are two mice. They then go back to Luke's grandma, they explain what's happened. She's, she takes it pretty well. If a mice was talking to me, I don't think I would talk back. They then hatch a plan. They know what they need to do. They're going to serve this potion to the witches at their dinner. And what better way to do it than to slip it into some food that they're eating, like soup. Now, throughout the second half of this film, Grandma and Luke are trying to get Bruno back to his very entitled Karen parents. It's not very successful. It's a great theme about loving your child and neglecting your child and what happens when, you have to be responsible for your child. And after a brief adventure going through the kitchen, after alarming a lot of cooks, they have put the potion into soup. And there's actually a witch helping cook the soup that doesn't even realize this. So she tastes it, she tries it, she turns into a mouse. They all freak out in the kitchen, but nonetheless, the soup gets served. Now, entering this dinner party, the Grand High Witch has an assistant who's been mistreated this entire film, and all she wants to be is just a powerful evil witch. The Grand High Witch doesn't invite her to this dinner party, so she frickin' quits and leaves. This was smart of her. It's time for dinner. The witches all consume this soup, including the Grand High Witch, and they all turn into mice. Disgusting. Seeing this is quite alarming. It's a very gross, smoky, oozy, squealy scene, and Bruno's dad sees that he almost ingested that soup, and things are different, and he accepts his son back into the family with his hysterical wife. The Grand High Witch is destroyed via splatting, and pretty much everyone flees this hotel because there's an infestation of mice and a whole lot of old ladies that have gone missing. Luke and Grandma Helga return back to her cottage in England. They decide not to go to the States yet, just to live out some of the trauma that they've just experienced. However, Luke is still a mouse. Kind of weird. They've come to terms with this. Magically, all of the money that the Grand High Witch was going to give to these witches shows up at their doorstep, and they decide this is the money that they're going to use to go overseas and to destroy all of the witches that are planning to kill the children of America. However, maybe those witches could get here soon. That night, the ex-mistreated assistant shows up. She's a good witch now. She doesn't have claws, she doesn't have the bad feet, and she's got some nice hair. She basically turns Luke back into a human and brings back his two pet mice, and they all live happily ever after, except the witches. And it's something to note that this film includes the use of a lot of funny special effects. We've got prosthetic use, we've got animal use, and we have Jim Henson's infamous puppetry. All around, just a great way to kick off the 1990s. It is time for All Eyes on the Actor. Just roll with me here. Of course we're talking about Anjelica Huston in this film. Now, I will admit, I really did not know much about Anjelica Huston prior to researching this. I knew that she was on one of my favorite shows on TV, and I know that she's Morticia Addams. However, I did not know some of the juicy details of her life. She is just as glamorous as she seems on camera, so let's get into it. Ms. Huston grew up in showbiz. She was a child actor, and she worked closely with her father, who was a director who cast her on a lot of things. Good for her. Now, they grew up mostly in Ireland. After her mom died in a car crash, she moved to the States, did a lot of modeling for fashion, which I feel like that's where we get her poise and elegance, especially in this film that she kind of manipulates in a comedic way. She then went on to study acting and then began to do her work on film and TV. In 1985, she won her first Oscar for her performance in Prizzy's Honor. Now, at the time, this made her the first person in history to win an Oscar while having a parent and grandparent who also won an Oscar. Now, just like a lot of the actresses I've talked about in this series, filming The Witches was not the most easy process for her, mainly because of that intense prosthetic scene, right? That takes up about 10-15 minutes of the whole movie. It was reported that Anjelica Huston had to sit in a makeup chair for 6 hours to get the prosthetics put on, and then to have them properly removed so they could, reuse anything for shooting. And she said, quote,
"I was so uncomfortable and tired of being encased in rubber under hot lights for hours that the lines had ceased to make sense to me, and all I wanted to do was cry."
Relatable content. It looks pretty hokey and silly, and they could have easily done a stunt double or someone to put it in, but I think it's very cool that this glamorous woman said yes to being put in that freaking scary bodysuit prosthetic. Along with some of the prosthetic drama, she also had some issues with the smoke that they used when the mice were all killed, because it was green, so it was oil-based, and so it would simmer underneath the purple contacts that all of these women were wearing, so she had to have her eyes flushed regularly by a professional.
Anything for the art, I guess.
Pretty soon after The Witches premiered, she went on to film an iconic couple of movies as Morticia Addams in The Addams Family. I think everyone knows that she's played Morticia, and everyone is pretty familiar with how great and like breathtaking and easy she is. However, she did go on to do a bunch of other stuff, including Agnes Brown, which she directed as well as Daddy Daycare. She also is a recurring voice actress on the Disney animated film series, that whole canon of things, where she voices Queen Clarion. Now, she is a heavily awarded actress who also dabbles in directing and producing, and pretty heavily involved in activism overseas in Ireland, where she's a little more familiar with a lot of the politics and whatnot over there. But what she's mainly known for is her work with animal rights. Specifically, she sits on the board for Save the Chimps, which the goal with that is to prevent apes and chimps and monkeys from being sent out into space, or to being treated unfairly on set, or you know, all that mumbo jumbo. And she's also done some work for PETA. I know PETA's a little controversial. I don't really know the details. And in 2018, she donated all of her fur coats to homeless shelters and animal shelters. Can you imagine? I bet this woman has some elegant fur coats. Her personal life is a little interesting, something that just because I'm younger and she's not really in the headlines anymore, she's got quite the catalog of people that she's been involved with romantically, marriagely. She's actually wrote about this in her 2 tell-all books, including her time with Jack Nicholson, who would send her flower bouquets while she was filming The Witches, which all of the crew went nuts for. I think her lifestyle can definitely be punctuated by the fact in 2014 she sold her house for $11.15 million. She originally wanted $18 million, but times are tough. What an icon! Do you think she just sits there and does this to her hair? She's had the same hairstyle for decades. I think my favorite part about her in this film is just how poised she is, how regal, how glamorous looking, while like what comes out of her mouth and some of the topics that she's so confident about are the most wackiest things ever. I think she captures Roald Dahl's vintage mundane whimsicalness, right? He mixes like normal boring life with colorful imaginative themes that are pretty warped. Alrighty, let's talk about this film's iconic impact. This is actually the last film that Roald Dahl was alive to help make, and there's some drama with this because the book ends a little bit differently than the movie does. The book ends and Luke is still a mouse. And Roald Dahl was furious that director Nicholas Roeg would just change this, right? As an author, that would probably be pretty frustrating. As a viewer of the movie, I'm not sure that it would have the same appeal, you know, of the fact that there is a happy ending. I don't know, but Roald Dahl was pissed. Now, the director made 2 different versions of this. Roald Dahl cried tears of joy when he saw the correct ending, but was pretty mad when he found out that they were using the alternate ending. So he threatened to do a publicity campaign against the film, and our buddy Jim Henson came into clutch and really told him that he shouldn't do that, you know, that's just bad juju for the film and everyone involved, and not the look. So Roald Dahl bowed out, but demanded that his name be taken off of the film, and to this day, it's not on any of his Wikipedia or any of his credits. Speaking of Jim Henson, this is the last film that he ever worked on before his death. And Jim Henson, for all you kids out there, was huge. If you're familiar with Jim Henson's canon of work, the robotic puppety mouses are a pretty signature style that, to me, brings a certain edge of nostalgia. Now again, we've got more controversy. The film was originally slated to be released by a company called Lorimar? But the company was dissolved. So after this production filmed, The footage and everything sat on a shelf until it was picked up by Warner Brothers. Now, this film premiered overseas, and then it premiered in the States, and it did pretty okay. It was nominated for a lot of awards, it won some awards, but it will forever be in history as a cult classic. Something iconic that I just can't miss is that when filming this, it's rumored, I'm not sure it's a rumor, I think it's more so intentional, but the scene where all the witches are bald and they're just sitting listening, or even when they're walking in with their powdery wigs, there's actually a lot of male identifying people in the shot, and I think you can pretty plainly see this, that you've got like the plumber from down the street in a granny blouse. It's quite funny. If you look when you're watching, like the back couple rows are all what look like men. It's rumored that these are members of the crew, that they just needed to fill space very cheaply, but you know, believe what you want, I guess. I sprinkled it throughout this entire video, but let's talk about Luna Muse. This is like what inspired me to do my drag, to be a performer, to live my authentic witchy gay life, you know. As I said before, this is a very Twin Peaks, mundane, macabre, very whimsical, political almost, movie that just like lives on in my head of like, this is so weird.
The concept is so strange. Road doll is so messed up.
I love it.
Angelica Houston's performance in this, I think, just captures like who Luna Muse would be in real life. I obviously don't want to murder children because that takes a lot of energy, and I love children. I want you to see something. The lineup of all of these witches in their like off-kilter wigs and very like scratchy grungy makeup and their bad shoes, mismatched outfits, that is like what a curtain call of an amateur drag show competition looks like. Watching it as an adult who has done my fair share of amateur drag competitions, really humbling. Also, when you watch this, did you clock the fact that the Grand High Witch has a full set of Louis Vuitton suitcases just filled with money and spells and potions? I could only wish. Revisiting this movie for the series inspired me to revisit some of Roald Dahl's work, the books. I remember loving Charlie and the Chocolate Factory just because of the eliminative quality of how all the kids get one by one off. But I do think it's a fun capstone of, you know, how witchy films started off in the 90s. So there you have it. I served up some glamour today. I didn't paint on eyebrows. I've got this Cleopatra wig that I may or may not have gotten tiny little wig shards in my face when I was cutting the bangs. Let me know down in the comments below if you are familiar with this film, if you love this film as much as I do, if you've never seen this film in your life. Let me know. I want to hear from you. And yeah, I guess that's all I have for you. I dig. And just like that, another one in the casket. Broomstick. I feel like we should all do the homework and watch the original before we watch the remake with Anne Hathaway. I hope they don't ruin it. They can't. As always, make sure to subscribe to me on YouTube, like my page on Facebook, follow me on all the social medias, that's where I'm at, in the megapixel clouds, because we can't see each other face to face. Anyways, that's all I have for you guys this week. I hope you're enjoying, and as always, stay spooky. Bye!